Oh my. Hey everyone! So I recently read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I finally got around to this and I have some thoughts. So today's video is going to be a book review video, but sort of a discussion. I will get into spoilers in the later part of the video, but I will let you know when I get to the spoilery section. But anyway, I remember this being really hyped up when it was first released a few years ago, but I never had much of an interest in The Cruel Prince just because, I don't know, I feel like I don't really find the whole fae thing that interesting, so I never really considered this book. This is a very hyped series, and recently the final book was released. I just saw a ton of people that I watch on YouTube talking about Queen of Nothing. At first, I never really had much of an interest to read The Cruel Prince. Even when it was released, I was like, yeah, it's hyped. I was still not convinced until I watched a few booktubers that I follow who don't normally read YA fiction. They reviewed The Cruel Prince and they had very positive things to say about it. So that kind of tipped me over the edge and I caved in and I purchased The Cruel Prince. Anyway, so I ended up reading it and I have some thoughts. I'll kind of give you a synopsis of what The Cruel Prince is about if you don't already know. I don't know where you've been, but here it is. The Cruel Prince is a YA fantasy set in a world where the Fae live parallel to the human world. The story follows our main protagonist, Jude, who is a mortal. When she was a child, she used to live in the human world, but one day her parents were murdered by a Fae. It turns out that her mother used to have a Fae husband, but had an affair with a human lover and ran away into the mortal realm. So from there, her twin sister Taryn and her oldest half-sister Vivian and Jude herself were then spirited away into the land of Fairy. Now this particular Fae who murdered her parents is regarded as this fierce and powerful warrior general of the High Court of Fairy. His name is Madoc, but because he's a creature bound by honor, he doesn't kill or abandons the children. In fact, he's not really an asshole. Unlike most of the Fae, and we'll get to them shortly. So Madoc raises the children like one of the gentry. They're part of the High Court and they're well educated with the other noble children. Madoc ends up caring and loving the three sisters equal to his own Fae son, Oak. So the three sisters end up sort of growing up in the land of Fairy. And 10 years later, Jude is now a teenager, grown up in the fairy world. She's grown to admire this world and she longs to be a part of Fairy. However, a mortal living in Fairy is a dangerous affair. Jude and her human twin sister are often ridiculed and tormented by the other Fae children. Jude hates that she's a mortal. No matter how much she trains at being a sharp-minded strategist and a warrior, like her adoptive father, she ultimately knows that she'll never be as powerful and as gifted as the Fae. But that doesn't stop her from striving for her goal of being a knight for the High King. However, that all changes when the High King of Fairy decides to abdicate his throne and crown one of his children as the new successor to rule the realm. There's a lot of political intrigue and scheming that goes on behind the scenes of the court, which was really interesting to read about and kept me guessing throughout the story. The world had a very dark, whimsy quality about it, which I adored, and I loved Holly Black's writing style. It was easy to read, but also being very descriptive at the same time. That just pulled me in, particularly with the food and clothing. Beautiful. I also liked the relationship that was portrayed between the three sisters as well. Their interactions felt genuine and loving, particularly with Vivi, her oldest half-sister, who is a legitimate daughter of Madoc, so she's half Fae. Although Jude and Taryn choose to assimilate into the Fae world and comes to respect and somewhat love their adoptive father, Vivi is not having it. She completely rejects whatever the foster family desires from her. She constantly rebels against Madoc's wishes and continues to hate Madoc for murdering her parents, and she never forgives him for that, which is fair. Unlike Jude, she hates everything about Fae and wants to go back and live in the human world. The only thing that's preventing her from doing that is the love she has for her two sisters. She doesn't want to abandon them in Fairy and is constantly trying to convince them to run away with her back into the human world. Taryn, on the other other hand, chooses to embrace Fairy and her eventual place in this world. She knows that one day she'll need to marry and become a peace offering for another court. She knows this is to do with political alliances, and she kind of accepts that. She's sort of timid and a bit of a goody two-shoes. However, she wasn't really fleshed out, and to be honest, I was more annoyed at her throughout the story. In my opinion, she didn't have much to do for the story and didn't have a significant impact on the overall plot. And when I think about it, same with Vivi. Like, I loved her, but she really didn't come into play until much later in the story, pretty much towards the end of the book. She's often doing her own thing. She occasionally goes to the human realm. She doesn't really do much in the story. I think that she was severely underused, which is a shame because she would have made for a very interesting character. A half-fae that could easily adapt into this world than her human siblings, but completely rejects it. It's a contrasting response to the same upbringing as Jude, and they kind of want what the other one has, but they still maintain an endearing way of caring for one another as well, which was sweet. But I really think that the sisterly bond should have been played out more. I think that both sisters should have had something to do with the overall plotline, and there should have been more substance to their characters. Now, with all that being said, you might be wondering, hello, this book is called The Cruel Prince. Where is the Cruel Prince? And you are right to wonder, my friend. Because he isn't really a part of the plot as much as you would think. The title is based around him. Well, okay, no, he's in the book a lot, but you would think that he would do a lot more in Jude's narrative, but he really doesn't. Especially in the first half of the book, he only really comes in to bully both Jude and Taryn. The High King has, I think, 5 children altogether, and Prince Cardan, who is the Cruel Prince, is the youngest son that he has. The youngest and cruelest son of them all. Actually, I think Balkan, I think that's how you say his name, but yeah, he's the worst. But Prince Cardan is the worst in Jude's eyes because him and his friends, Locke, Valerian, and I think Nicatia is how you say that girl's name. I may be wrong, don't come for me. They regularly torment both Jude and Taryn because they're mortals living with the same privileges as the Fae, and is constantly targeted and mistreated for that reason. While Taryn is very passive about the situation, she's sort of the type to put her head down and ignore all the torment in hopes that she doesn't provoke the Fae any further. Jude, on the other hand, is not having it. She is a lot more stubborn. Provoke is what she'll do. She's a fighter and she will fight back. Jude and Taryn sort of have an advantage because of her father's, or at least her foster father's, political status. So the bullying sort of has to happen in isolation, although there was that one time. And also because Cardan is a prince, the way Jude retaliates has to be done through scheming, which was wonderful to see, especially because she's treated in a certain way and you just want her to one-up them. Now, when we're talking about the world building, I think Holly Black does a great job at building an environment and atmosphere that is fitting for this darker, whimsical world. Even though the fairy world is full of magic and wonder, it was also dark, brutal and dangerous. She made that very clear in her writing. I appreciated that the Fae were represented as tricksters. They were mischievous and not to be trusted. I also like how the Fae couldn't lie, and so how they word things and sort of twist it makes you sort of distrust everyone and question their motives if they're helping Jude. So the intrigue is one of the stronger elements of the story. The rules and customs of this world were also a little quirky, which I appreciated. However, the first book is very contained in the one kingdom. Because we're following Jude, we don't expand on the world that much, and we're also kind of stuck in a small area of the kingdom. There were a variety of different Fae folk, but they're only briefly mentioned, and there also isn't an established class system between the Fae folk, so I didn't really know who was upper class nobles and lower class people. The only difference was that humans are treated very poorly. Aside from the royal family, they all seemed like they were the same. Maybe it's because Jude was part of the noble kids and that's all we saw. I would have liked to see the fairy world explored more and all the little intricacies. At the beginning of the book, Jude is sort of dealing with more personal issues and the day-to-day bullying, and it wasn't that interesting to me. However, when the plot shifts and Jude is pulled into the midst of political machinations, Holly Black is able to reveal how grim this world truly is underneath all that whimsical facade. I liked and I was invested. That was when the story got really interesting and it pulled me in until the very end. The world she lives in is not kind to her. They're not welcoming to humans and there's a lot of scheming and backstabbing within the court, and she needs to learn and grow to fit into this wicked and cruel world of politics. In terms of characters, I've already mentioned Jude's sisters. They just needed to be fleshed out more. As much as I loved Vivi as a character, she didn't have much to do. She didn't really have much of a presence throughout the story. Jude also has a younger Fae brother named Oak, who is Maddox and his new Fae wife's son. We had no connection, no nothing towards him. He was like a stranger. No development at all. In terms of the whole family dynamic, it was very disconnected. Even though it was very civil and it seemed like they genuinely cared and respected one another, it seemed a little disconnected and kind of surface level. I didn't end up really caring about any of the family members except for Jude. Jude is probably my favorite character, and I'm glad because that's the protagonist we're following. She was resilient and strong-willed. She had her fair share of odds stacked against her, but she still continued to learn and strategize to play the game of politics. She strived for her ambitious goals and she just went for it. I appreciated that even through all the bullying and torment that she endured, she was able to face it and move past it. She slowly becomes morally desensitized and evolves into a much darker person that is more equipped to handle this brutal world and makes questionable decisions along the way. Cardan, who I thought would have a much more prominent presence throughout the book, but he really doesn't, especially the first half of the story. He was that typical bully character, extremely unlikable and just more annoying than anything. Just the way he harms and humiliates people is sort of unforgivable as a character. There is a point in the book where him and his friends degrade Jude in a way that is so wrong, so uncomfortable, that I just couldn't get by that, and I couldn't imagine this person being a part of this sort of hate-to-love relationship. In fact, by the end of it all, it's still a hate-to-hate relationship. But what bugs me is that Cardan has inconsistencies with his personality. From what he was like from the beginning of the book to what he was like at the end was very abrupt and jarring. He definitely became more likable as a character, but there wasn't a smooth transition in the development of an extreme high school bully to a sort of charismatic jerk character. I just didn't see it. It just came so suddenly. There was just this character shift that just didn't make sense. And once his personality shifted into this new sort of persona, there was no remnant of his cruel nature that was present at the beginning of the story. And the time frame from the beginning of the book to the end hadn't been that long for that sort of drastic change. I'm pretty sure. It didn't make sense. So I don't know. I know Holly Black wants us to ship both Jude and Cardan, but I need a smoother transition, okay? And some realistic character development in order to believe this change. And I can't forgive him for the horrible and questionable stuff that he did, but I guess it's just the cruel and brutal world that they live in, and this sort of behavior is just to be accepted and just to move on from, which, I don't know. Do I agree with that? I don't think so. But that's how it was written. With all that being said, overall I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I know it's conflicting. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but what I enjoyed it doesn't make sense, but entertainment factor 10 out of 10. However, of course, we're trying to think more critically about the book, so I have a few more points that I want to discuss. There's a lot of problematic relationships in this book. First of all, starting with Maddox and his relationship between the sisters, it's an odd circumstance. He murdered their parents, so why should they like this guy? Even though he ends up being a decent father figure, he's a Fae war general, so the way he raises Jude up, he raises her as as a strategist, and so she doesn't really have a normal upbringing. There is this constant conflict within herself whether she can truly trust Maddock. So there is a certain amount of unease between this father-daughter relationship. A lot of the relationships are rooted in and built upon power, how much power and protection they can gain from forming an alliance, and how much that could elevate their status in this society. So it's definitely problematic how this society works. But these unhealthy relationships and actions are not romanticized, and they're not excused. They're kind of acknowledged, but what can you do? You live in this brutal Fae world and you have to play by their rules and survive it. Anyway, so that is it for my sort of non-spoilery section. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It was definitely entertaining. It was fast-paced. I was pretty invested in the story once it kicked off from that initial transition. I'm super excited to continue on to see what the story unfolds into. But yeah, those are my thoughts on The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I am now going to get into a little bit of a spoilery section, so if you haven't read the book, you can click out of the video now. Bye for now if you don't want to be spoiled. So that is your final warning. So getting into the minor stuff, didn't like Taryn. She was just annoying. This whole side plotline with Locke didn't need to happen. I was not on board with it. Also Locke, I kind of like the name Locke because of Locke Lamora, the Gentleman Bastard series. Totally different. Locke was, from the beginning, I know he was a bit more nicer to Jude, but he was still hanging out with Cardan and kind of let these things happen to Jude and Taryn. So I was just not having it. I didn't trust him from the beginning, and my distrust for him made sense because he was an arsehole and he kind of liked a bit of drama. He kind of played around with both Jude and Taryn to make other people jealous, so didn't make sense, didn't like him. Both Taryn and Locke is sort of an annoying side plot. Also, Jude's narration can be a little bit misleading. Certain things that were revealed at the very end, we had no idea that she was plotting those things. Like crowning Cardan, I did not think that she would crown Cardan. It doesn't really make sense, but also because he's sort of bound to her for at least a year and a day. At least she can kind of control him and what he does in the courts, so that sort of does make sense. But you know, once that year is up, Cardan's free to do whatever he wants, so that's a risk you don't want to take. He's supposed to become a likable character towards the end, but I didn't see it. I don't think you'll forgive Jude for what she did at the end. There is that sexual tension between him and her. I think it's sort of like a weird fascination. It's sort of weird because they both hate each other, but they kind of are lusting for each other. It's weird. It's weird. Also, it's getting very dark. I am so sorry. I'm just curious now that Cardan is a king, like how he's going to be. I mean, definitely I'm glad that, is it Balkan? His older brother. Like, I'm glad that he wasn't crowned because he was a complete asshole. There was a point where it's revealed that he beats Cardan up. I know you're supposed to sort of sympathize, but that didn't mean I forgave Cardan for all the stuff that he did. And I didn't expect everyone to be slaughtered at the crowning. I knew Cardan was going to be crowned, but the way it happened, I didn't expect it to happen that way. I thought Cardan would have wanted the crown. I don't know. That's the vibe I got. I thought there would have been some sort of other scheming involved where he was going to take it from Balkan, but it ended up not being that way. Also, the whole spy thing with Jude, I think could have been explored more or kind of developed more. She kind of becomes this spy for Dane. Without much of an experience, we don't really see her trained to become this awesome spy. It is now extremely dark. I think it's about to rain. It's very dark. I don't know what else to say. I think that's it. I better just end this video now before I completely lose the light. But what are your thoughts on The Cruel Prince? It was unexpected for me and I ended up really enjoying the story. I hope you have a wonderful reading week and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!